recommendation. I think it took parts of both what we heard very clearly from the public testimony, and it is making a statement about value judgment. But I feel like it balances, I think, the best of both worlds. I think we're going to take a lot of lessons that we've learned along the Central Corridor, which has been a much larger build-out. Streetcars are going to be a little less intensive than that, but we have this lesson learned from building a green line already, which many of us have been involved in. And even then, some of the stationary planning, we had the same questions about the economic development that had actually been quantified by someone who'd done the market research along the different stops. And so we actually had the data, kind of the next phase of what this study will be approving. And so I appreciate that we're working smart on this project and not trying to duplicate, but learning from other efforts. And so I'm fully going to support this recommendation because I think it moves us in a direction that gets us more data that's more helpful. And I think increasingly, the reality is streetcars are a form of looking at economic development. And these days we have to be looking at different ways that we redefine the role of the city. And so I appreciate all the staff work because I think, and the summary of the very polemic comments from the public testimony, that I think this recommendation really gets at.
Commissioner Oliver, then Commissioner Kaiser, then Commissioner Edwards.
And thank you, Madam Chair. And I wanted to clarify what I was asking earlier because I want to recognize that what we just did was a very, very, very preliminary study, and we're nowhere near the point where we're definitely saying yes or no to streetcar. The way I see the previous study is there were lines going all through the city. We had to pick one to really focus on to do the really nitty-gritty work as far as figuring out where it's going to work, and we picked it, or the study picked one, and that's the West to East 7th corridor. And ultimately the concern over the financials kind of comes to the city council, not so much to us. But it's still worth knowing the timeline on this because I agree with Commissioner Naker, Commissioner Sherpa when he was here, and some of the others that the preliminary study wasn't that promising as far as the numbers went. And especially given that sort of what I'm hearing is the next phase is, well, okay, we're going to wait and see what Met Council and Ramsey County and some other folks do before launching into this. It'd be more comforting to know that sort of the next phase of study at the moment that's proposed is in-house. Yes, staff time's precious, but I'm comfortable with the idea they can juggle some things and someone can, Michelle or other folks can take the time and look at the other systems that exist and sort of tell us how they've integrated and how they work with enhanced bus service and some of these others. I'm not as comfortable spending time chasing down foundation grants and others to go hire outside consultants to do the same thing, especially if there's no urgency. If a large part of the outcome is going to depend on waiting for the Met Council to figure out their ERP plan, waiting for Ramsey County to figure out some of the regional rail. I really don't want to see the city, and we don't commit anything, we're recommending to the city council, it's important to remember that, but I'm really not that thrilled with recommending tonight that we put that level of commitment in, especially if anything we do is contingent on some outside plan.
Commissioner Kaiser?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My thought process on this is that should we go forward on the next phase of the study, we're going to be looking at aspects of it in the context of TOD, and it's going to show very clearly that I think that the vast majority of that line on the corridor will get the buildings there. They're not going to be functional anymore. conjunction with, you know, some of the other studies going on, like the board line, you know, you start taking off the, you take the line off West 7th Street and you put it onto the old board line or onto Shepherd Road or something like that, and there'll be an impact to that too. I mean, you know, each one of these situations is going to have consequences, and I think studying it isn't inadequate. But I think going forward, the idea that we're going to get this information is going to clearly help the community make a final decision on this.
Commissioner Anderson.
Commissioner Taft's comment made me think about the way that the new line was laid out. Their initial plan, luckily we came up with a second phase of the plan where we added 3 stations. And I think that this study is a similar sort of thing where there's a lot of transit planning going on in the corridor, but having a voice in that conversation would be, right from the beginning, would be really useful. So this study and the concerns it brings up will be a way, I think, for the city to call more attention to the needs of the community and how the transit should actually operate. So I'm kind of a fan of moving forward with this, just for that reason.
Commissioner Aker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To Commissioner Oliver's point, and again, I'm very much in favor of getting more information. I think we do need, especially the comparison to bus, which has come up a lot. I was sort of disappointed that that wasn't part of the initial feasibility study, because I think it's a key factor. But so I do think we need more information. I guess what I'm wondering is whether we can get that from some of these other studies that are being done. When I asked Michelle about that this week, you know, she pointed out that the Met Council work on the arterial rapid bus system may actually come back with some of those comparisons and wouldn't require them an additional separate study. So I guess part of what I'm wondering is maybe instead of both parts of this resolution, the first part is great. You know, we approved the long-term network. We think if we do streetcar, that's the part that makes sense. That's where we should do it. Even approving the starter line makes sense, I think. But then instead of the motion right now, which sort of has the urgency of yes, go ahead and continue with this detailed study, maybe there's some way of wording it such that we do kind of want to wait and see what we learn from these other studies, specifically in terms of the bus comparison, and then determine what we need to do further to analyze it.
Something here. Commissioner Harris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am going to support the resolution this morning. I'm excited and encouraged about the potential development that we're thinking that a streetcar line could bring to the city. And we've clearly seen already before the Green Line even opens the pretty massive amount of development and really good development that's bringing to our city. And so I'm intrigued with the assertions I think that we see in the study about potential for development along the streetcar line. So I think it's important to dig deeper to see if, to do some real detail analysis, see if that development will actually materialize. But I do hear, I think, loud and clear the concerns expressed by the community, particularly the business community and the existing businesses along the corridor. And so I think it would be really important to make sure that the existing businesses are part of the process, that we are looking hard at what the impact on existing businesses will be in construction, particularly as well as after the line is up and running.
Could I just ask Donna and Michelle if you could comment a little on timing, necessity, and urgency on this? Is this something you need to proceed with forthwith, or do we have a lot of time to think further about cost and the results of these other studies?
I guess I'm not sure, given the pace of the other studies that are underway, if we're going to have a lot of clarity in the near term about, you know, what exactly those costs might be. I think, as Michelle said, we will participate in these studies and we will see what information we get from those additional studies and then figure out what work needs to be done to kind of fill out the pieces to figure out if it makes sense to move ahead on streetcar for 7. There's not a particular deadline, but I think these other studies are moving forward, and I think the staff feels it's important for the city to make it very clear that we think streetcars are an important element to be considered in their studies, so that it gets the kind of attention that we think it should get as part of those studies, especially Riverview. So, I don't know if that answers the question, but.
Okay. Any other comments? The motion on the table from the Transportation Committee is the resolution as written. So I would entertain any amendments, or we can proceed to vote on the resolution as it is, and if it succeeds, it succeeds. If it doesn't, then I entertain additional resolutions. Is that clear enough? Commissioner Padilla?
Yeah, no,
Dia.
yeah, thank you, Chair.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to support the resolution as it is. I'm just going to reiterate the same concern that I've said in the past, which is, I think part of this overall look needs to focus on where we're going to achieve ridership. I mean, I think we're continuing to face this question of how we're going to shift people from multiple lines of new transit going in, whether it's bus rapid transit or corridors and rail. You know, there will be a lot of costs associated with developing a streetcar line. And if we're just shifting riders from one mechanism to another, that to me is not an effective way to sustain transit in this community. Now, if we have concrete data that reflects an increased ridership over a certain period of time, or we start to see those numbers change, that's another thing. But I haven't seen that yet, and that's my biggest concern. I don't think we need more modes to put fewer people on the bus and more people on a streetcar. That doesn't make any sense to me. So my ongoing concern with this is not necessarily a study. It's whether we need, in this period of time, this many ways to move people around the streets.
Okay. Commissioner Ayers?
Madam Chair. So I've been on the fence on this, and I've listened to the commissioners. I think there are a lot of good points, such that I will support it. I am hoping, I guess, that this next study will provide a lot of the information and provide some answers to the kinds of questions that have been raised so far, such that at the end of the study, we're not going, we need to study some more. I understand you always need to study some more at a certain point, but I'm hoping that we can get most of what we need out of this next study, such that we can start thinking about making some informed decisions about moving forward.
Any comments? Commissioner Stern?
Just one. I've seen this presentation before, and the last time I saw it was at a business association meeting, and there were a lot of unanswered questions. So I think specifically, like on Payne Avenue, for example, in some areas it's only 66 feet wide, and so that would imply that parking has to go. And since a parking study that was done a few years ago said that we're 1,800 parking stalls shy, the street parking is very valuable to the businesses. So, but this study doesn't answer some of those questions. So I would move in favor myself of more information that would answer some of the questions that were raised that were not answered the last time I saw it.
If I could just ask Michelle to clarify, I do believe the study did look at potential parking losses on each of these corridors. And just to explain again, that streetcars usually run in existing traffic lanes, so it normally would not require taking on parking except at the stops